Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Backbone Podcast, where common sense still makes sense in a world that is sick and getting sicker. And if you have been under a rock, if you have just been paying attention to the media storm of Israel and Iran and Trump and all the nonsense that's been going on, you may want to listen to this podcast because tonight we have the world premiere opening of the greatest superhero America has ever had, and that superhero's name is Superman. Now, why are we talking about Smallville tonight? Why are we having a Smallville rewind? Well, the reason why we're having a rewind is because Smallville is probably the only reason superhero films in general have come back. And you're going to say I'm crazy for saying this, but I'm not. Because Smallville, if you remember, came out in October of 2001. 24 years ago, when I was a young man. I was an unmarried guy. I was ambitious. I was working for the city in the mayor's office. I was making a lot of money. I was spinning plates with a lot of chicks. No kids, no wife, no real responsibilities. A few weeks before the premiere of Smallville, I was standing in front of the World Trade Center and watching two planes smash into him. And then I saw those buildings fall. That day changed the world, well, changed America forever. And if you weren't around then, if you're younger than 24, 25 years old, I'm sorry to say, but you missed out on how great America used to be. There weren't cameras all over the place. There wasn't, a militarized police force. It just was so different. And 24 years ago, when Smallville first premiered, it was a risky and a bit of a, how should I say, corny concept. It had a bit of a Archie-esque high school experiment type TV show. We follow the early life of Clark Kent. And the show was created by Alfred Goh and Miles Millar. They produced this show for the Warner Brothers Network, which then merged with the UPN, which was United Paramount Network, which they created into what we now know as the CW. How did Smallville come about? How did this coming-of-age adventure of a teenager named Clark Kent and his little town of Smallville, Kansas, come about before he becomes the Man of Steel? Well, before Smallville was pitched, there was a show that was in production. There were scripts, there were writers, there was a writing team, and it was a show that was supposed to be about Bruce Wayne, a young Bruce Wayne, and it was simply called Bruce Wayne. The drama series chronicled the young protagonist's life towards his destiny of becoming Batman. The show just died on a vine, never made it to air. The producers of the WB, or Warner Brothers Television, then started looking around for a show, an origin show for a superhero. They needed that time slot taken up, and the Superman idea came about. That idea would later turn into Smallville. The Bruce Wayne idea, ironically, 14 years later, of a young Bruce Wayne growing up without his parents, raised by his butler named Alfred, later would become, as some of you may know as Gotham. Gotham opened up 3 years later after the Smallville conclusion. But the Smallville coming of age show, to me, was a mega hit. Yes. Was it perfect? No. Was a tad bit corny at times? Of course. It was Americana, right? It was about pancakes and apple pie and Clark Kent always doing the right thing, never taking a shortcut. And the first 4 seasons of the show focused on his high school life. And the first scene of Smallville, we see the meteors coming right to Earth, right? Those kryptonite meteors are coming and they crash into Smallville. They do tremendous damage. They actually kill Lana Lang's parents and a few other people. And those kryptonite rocks and that kryptonite meteor shower would attribute to the what we would call the freak of a week, but people called Freak of the Week, which was basically what the first season of Smallville was about. It followed Clark and his friends, his complicated romance and infatuation with his neighborhood, with a neighborhood girl, a town girl named Lana Lang, who was casted perfectly by Kristen Kirk. His initial friendship with his future nemesis Lex Luthor. We see how Lex Luthor loses his hair because he gets caught in the middle of this meteor storm. He has big red hair in the beginning, and then when his father finds him in the cornfield, he loses all his hair. And we start to see how Clark begins to mature. Well, not mature, but begins to develop. He begins to discover his powers little by little. And all those questions that we always asked, how did the Kents get a birth certificate for him? Like, how did they put him in school? All these modern day questions you would ask today were answered by Smallville. They were rushed. They were always rushed. And they were kind of like, yeah, right, bullshit type answers, but at least you got the answers. So the first 4 seasons, of course, we were in high school, and it was more of a Archie Comics type thing. Seasons 5 and onward, Smallville ventures into Clark's adult years or early adult years, and eventually focusing on his career aspirations as they introduce Lois Lane, played by Erica Durance, who I was not particularly in love with, but she grew on me. Now, the one great thing that the producers Go and Millar did for this show, which I thought was brilliant, by the way, was they did not allow Clark Kent to develop his powers right away. Right? That mistake was made by the new Star Wars films, where they had oh god, I forget her name, Lara, I think her name was. She became a Jedi like way too fast. Like her powers just came right to her right away. Here, it does not happen, and they had the rule of no tights, no flights that they pitched to Warner Brothers, and they wanted to reduce the Man of Steel to just a bare moral boy, just the essentials. They wanted to examine Clark, and they wanted to just make him go through maturity, make him go through puberty, if you will, before he becomes the iconic superhero. And it worked. It worked. We love to see him grow. We love to see him struggle with, overhearing things and using X-ray vision, and the funny part where he's using his X-ray vision and he's looking in the girls' locker room and he's all embarrassed. The greatest part is when he discovers his heat vision and he just can't control it. These were unbelievably funny, interesting things. And in the season one, the storylines, as we said, always involved a villain that had the exposure to kryptonite that Clark had to fight at the end of the show, and they called it the Freak of the Week. And the first season also dealt with Clark's infatuation with Lana Lang and also the guilt that he suffers from because he knows that his arrival to Earth, he discovers his alien origins, by the way, but he discovers that his arrival is the reason why her parents are gone. Seasons 2, 3, and 4 move more towards an arc away from a villain of the week, and they focus on Clark's origins. They have major storylines with his Kryptonian heritage. They focus more on Lex Luthor's conflict with his father Lionel, who was played by Jonathan Glover. And he was absolutely brilliant. John Glover, I should say. Of course, Lionel Luthor was created for Smallville. He was supposed to be a parallel to the Kents, right? He wasn't a moral guy. He was a billionaire, ruthless billionaire industrialist who just hires and fires people at a whim, uses people, pays off people. And Lex, we see that Lex in the beginning is this good-hearted guy, but he's not. He's on the brink. And Lex in the first 3 seasons is infatuated. He's on a mission to find out who this incredible superhero is that's creating all these miracles in town. Now in season 1, Lex hits Clark on a bridge, hitting him into a pond. Of course, into a river, I should say. Of course, nothing happens to Clark. Clark saves Lex, and Lex now is on a mission to investigate how Clark survived that. By season 4, he finds out who Clark is. And that's when Lex begins to turn into the nemesis that we know and love as Lex Luthor. And he was portrayed by Michael Rosenbaum, who has a podcast now, and who I thought was pretty damn good as Lex Luthor. As the seasons move on, we get introduced to Jor-El, who is not the nicest guy in the world. And in season 4, Jor-El is instructing Clark from the spaceship that Jonathan Kent is hiding in the barn. Jonathan Kent and Martha Kent, of course, are brilliantly casted with John Schneider and Annette O'Toole. Annette O'Toole, by the way, was the love interest for Superman in Superman 3. And again, Smallville did something that no other show or no other movie had done. They made the traditionally older parents of Clark Kent more younger and hipper. And Jonathan Kent dies in the canon way. He dies of a heart attack, and we move on from there. But in season 4, Jor-El instructs Clark to find these Kryptonian stones, which have the knowledge of the universe. And when he finds these stones, Clark is able to form. He's able to create the Fortress of Solitude. During this season as well, Clark battles Brainiac. Brainiac tries to bring back General Zod. He tries to break open the Phantom Zone to release all the criminals on Earth. And we are then introduced in season 4 to the absolutely scrumptious, lovely Laura Vandervoort, who played Kara Zor-El, otherwise known as Supergirl. And she was as super hot as it gets. She was smoking. They didn't use. I don't think they used her enough, and she was kind of stiff in the show. But man, she wore that uniform pretty good. From five, from seasons 5, 6, and 7, it becomes more love triangles and love interests, and Clark is discovering himself more. But we then have crossovers, right? We then get introduced to Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow. We get introduced to, in season 8, a version of Doomsday who is more of a guy than anything else. Miss Tessmacher, who was in the comics, of course, becomes Tess Mercer, and she replaces Lex Luthor because Michael Rosenberg left the show. Well, you don't get General Zod, but we get Major Zod, who comes to the show in season 9. This is when the show begins to crumble a little bit. And in the final season, Clark sheds all his doubts and fears, and he becomes the hero he's meant to be while confronting the major challenges of Darkseid and the return of Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor dies in the previous seasons. That's how they wrote him off the show. But he's not dead. They keep him alive in this like this life support apparatus, and he then comes back to they I forget how they used his body basically as a vessel, and that's how it starts. Lex Luthor comes back. He hates Superman. He wants to kill Superman. He doesn't. He's given a truth serum. No, a serum that makes him forget everything, and then that's how he doesn't realize that Clark Kent is Superman anymore. And he hates Superman and he wants to destroy him. And then at the end of the show, we see him in his famous white suit that the comic books made him famous for as he's running for president of the United States, true to the comics. And that's how Smallville ends. Well, it doesn't end there, because the Smallville producers and Warner Brothers would then go on to make an electric comic book series for season 11, which was awesome. I loved it, and I'm geeking out. I know. Some of the cast and characters that were in the first few seasons, there was some slight controversies, like the creation of Chloe Sullivan, played by Allison Mack, who is now, I think she's still in jail because she was part of that sex cult in upstate New York. But Chloe Sullivan was the cousin of Lois Lane. She was a Smallville creation. Pete Ross, who in the comics was Clark Kent's friend in the earlier comics, was traditionally a white guy like everybody else in Kansas, pretty much. The show portrayed him by Sam Jones, who happens to be black. So some people were a little ticked off at that. Lionel Luthor, as we said, was a Smallville creation. Jansen Eccles, who is from Supernatural fame and also played Soldier Boy in The Boys, he was actually a frontrunner to play Clark Kent. He was given the role of Jason Teague, who became Lana Lang's love interest in season 4, and he follows Lana from Paris to Smallville and becomes a football coach there, but he loses his job when they find out he's dating a high school. He's a 25-year-old guy dating a girl in high school. But then they turn it around, and it's disclosed that he's been working with his mother to try to find the Kryptonian stones of knowledge. He was written off after season 4 because of his commitments to Supernatural. Eric Durance plays Lois Lane, as we said. She has a relationship with Oliver Queen, played by Justin Hartley. That's not. I've never read a comic where Lois Lane dated the Green Arrow. Jimmy Olsen is also in there, played by a guy who's pretty close to the Jimmy Olsen comic book character. He begins to date and marry Chloe Sullivan, which, of course, doesn't really happen in real life. He's a young boy. He's like an intern during the. He starts out as an intern in the comics, And of course, Tess Mercer is just a creation. These were all just uh, creations for the show. Brainiac was a paramedic struggling with inner demons, and you know, Zod was not. Zod was basically a vessel for Brainiac, and he became Major Zod, and he wasn't really that great in the show. And the great part about the last season or the last episode is right before he's about to get married. Clark Kent is marrying Lois Lane, which again, not part of canon. But he's about to put on a gold kryptonite ring, which would take away his powers forever. And I forget if Chloe Sullivan was the one who figured it out or stopped it. And Clark then fights um, Darkseid, and then he's given the suit, and that's the first time we see him rip open the suit, rip open his shirt, and we see him fly into the atmosphere, out of the atmosphere, I should say, as Darkseid, I should say, has a planet that's about to crash into Earth and destroy all of humanity. Superman saves the day, and he goes on to begin his adventures that we all know and love. Was to show The Sopranos, was to show All in the Family, was to show Breaking Bad. No, of course not. It was a great show, and it was essential for the revival of the superhero genre, because the superhero genre, with the failures of the Superman movies of the 80s and the Batman movies of the 90s, no one would commit to making another Superman film or another Batman film. I believe if the new generation of young boys who watched Smallville, who became addicted to Smallville, didn't show an interest in, didn't revive the superhero genre. The Smallville was so influential in bringing back Superman and making him cool again. It got the nostalgia of people like me. It got the interest of younger people, millennials and in general, that it created this spark for the Dark Knight trilogy, for Superman Returns, for the Man of Steel, for Batman versus Superman, and now for the Superman movie that is coming out today. Many people won't see that, but it's the truth. Smallville was also the spark that started the CW's Arrowverse, which led to crossovers and these great shows like The Flash, and these great shows that were coming out, and these crossovers that brought the nostalgia back of all these great characters. Am I a little biased here when I say Smallville is a great show and Superman's a great character? Yeah, I probably am. But this show was must-watch TV every Tuesday at 9 p.m. until they moved it to Wednesday at 8 p.m. And then they moved it again to Thursday at 8 p.m. And then they put it in that death spot on Friday at 8 p.m. in the last two seasons. But it was, at the time, a tremendous show. You got to see Clark as he never was. It was almost like seeing the teenage years and the years of Jesus in his 20s. This was almost the equivalent of it. He suffers from what teenage boys suffer from. He gets a cold. That happened. He hits puberty. How did that happen? How do you deal with Superman dealing with puberty? He turns into a bad boy when he gets, I think it's blue kryptonite, turns him into like evil Clark, and he's riding a motorcycle and he's got a leather jacket on. I mean, it was corny. It was funny, but it was one of those things. But we saw all those questions that you would ask, all those questions you would ask about, you know, how did Clark do this, or how did Jonathan Kent do that, or how did Mrs. Kent get away with this, or why is Lex bald? Smallville looked at those questions and answered them all. So tonight, as many of you go out and hopefully see the movie, or maybe this weekend you'll see the movie, or if you're going to do something else in this beautiful weather, it's hot and humid where I am. I'm dying right now. Try to buy a ticket and see this Superman film. In the comments, I would love to hear your opinion of it. I will have a review sometime this weekend, and we'll go from there. I will also try to rewind on Batman versus Superman, which I had my theories on and my opinions on that too, based on the great graphic novel by Frank Miller, written in 1985, The Dark Knight. But as for now, thank you again for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Be careful out there, my friends. Satan is always busy, but we always have Superman and God on our side. Be a man, have a backbone, because masculinity and common sense are worth standing up for. Go see Soups. We'll see you later.